Thank you very much, Mr. Singaram. Good morning from my side. Today I'm presenting from Pretoria, although I usually reside in Cape Town. And I want to talk to you today about not the bad part of whistleblowing, because we know enough, we read enough about that in the media. I want to talk about us as employees of an organization being upstanders rather than bystanders. So I'm going to tell you the story. No, before I tell you the story, let me just move on. So basically, the reason why I've thought of this, the more positive aspect to whistleblowing is because we know that humanity is in trouble. Doesn't matter how many good people there are. It just seems that, we read in the newspapers about the needless suffering of people. We read about violent protests, mob justice, murder, pandemic levels of corruption, and then, of course, extreme levels of poverty. South Africa actually has the most unequal society in the world, if one looks at the statistics. So it's no wonder that sometimes we feel a bit powerless because of all these things. And then despondency can set in. But my question to you today is, are we really powerless? So let's see. I hope by the end of the day, you will agree with me that we are not really that powerless. So I'm going to tell you the story of the judge, the bystanders, and the upstanders. Now, the judge that I'm referring to is retired Judge Mervyn King. And you might have heard about the King 4 report. No worries, I'm not going to take you through the whole thing. But the first principle of the King 4 report, which is all about good governance, says that the governing body, and then of course in terms of UKZN, that means the council, should lead ethically and effectively. And there's a whole explanation what that means. And then the second principle says that council should govern the ethics of the organization of UKZN in a way that supports the establishment of an ethical culture. Okay, so it's not just leading effectively and ethically, but they must take steps to ensure that there's an ethical culture in the institution. So what it then means for ethics in organizations is it refers to the ethical values of the university applied to all decision-making, all conduct, and relationship between UKZN, its stakeholders, all its stakeholders, internal and external, and then the broader society. So I then looked at what are the values of UKZN. And if I was now in a face-to-face session, I would have asked for people to recite these values, but that sometimes can be a bit embarrassing. So I thought I'll just bring them up on the screen. If we look there now at what is expected from the judge, is that all our interactions as employees and internal stakeholders of the university must be aligned with these values, the good, basically. So respect is number one. Basically, it says that at UKZN, as an institution and as the employees, it is expected that you promote mutual respect and courtesy, and then, of course, inclusiveness. Excellence. It's expected that UKZN and its internal stakeholders display, sorry, let me just move this thing, then I can see what's on my screen, display quality, leadership, and energy in everything that you do. Accountability, the university undertakes to be responsible and accountable in the behavior towards you as the internal stakeholders, but also the external stakeholders. Being client-orientated, oh, sorry, I don't know what's going on here. Being client-orientated, being honest, promises to deliver with integrity and adherence to good governance. And then the most, or not the most important one, but the one that underpins all of these values is trust. And there won't be students, there won't be service providers if there wasn't trust in the institution. And trust is enjoyed by every member of the university community. And it's the most important ingredient of the moral fiber of UKZN. And it is expected that all the internal stakeholders will embrace these values and live it in everything that one does, what that you do. So in organizational ethics, then we talk about the self, which is the UKZN, we talk about the stakeholders, and then the good values, those values that I have just mentioned. And there needs to be a balance between what is good and right and fair for UKZN and you as the internal stakeholders, as well as the external stakeholders. Then we can say that there's an ethical culture if this is continuously upheld. All right, so but ethics doesn't happen just by itself. There's a whole process. And that there are many policies that governs your behavior. There's the code of ethics. There's the values that I've just referred to. And there are different ways in which these documents should be made, not just words on paper, but they must come alive. When we think of conflicts of interest, for example, the policy must come alive and be ingrained in our behavior as employees, the gifts policy, and the like. But I'm not going to go into how Tony and his team are supposed to do all of that. I just want to talk now about the safe reporting system, which is the whistleblowing system, okay, where one can go once one have observed that someone is transgressing the values and the ethical standards of the institution. And we talk about the reactive part of ethics management. So once things have gone wrong, what do we do then? Okay, that's what okay, let me speak slower. That is what the judge says we should do as organizations. Now, I want to talk about the bystanders or the bystander effect. And I think that happens very often in organizations where it is sort of felt sometimes that, no, it's not my job to talk about, to report what I'm seeing. In South Africa in 2021, there were, it's a study that was done by the Institute of Business Ethics in the UK. And the question was asked, that was now in corporate South Africa, as have you personally observed or know of misconduct in your organization in 2021? And in South Africa, 28% of employees in corporate South Africa said they did. Okay, 28%. But only 2/3 of them reported it. So we're talking about 1/3 that were bystanders. Let's see what is a bystander. Kitty Genovese, let me tell you her story. In 1964 in New York City, Kitty was killed. And Kitty was on her way home, and she lived in this apartment building, lots of apartments in this building. And she came running down the street, screaming because someone was following her, okay, or chasing her, basically. She went into the lobby area of the apartment. The person came out with he showed her a knife, and he started stabbing her, and she screamed and screamed and screamed, but no one came out to help her. She then ran outside again, and ultimately, well, she screamed again. The story goes that, people's lights were on. They looked out. They couldn't ignore the screams. They could hear that. But No one called the police. And she died there right in front of those who bothered to look out of the window. And then she was left there for a while, and then only did someone call the police. So this led to two psychological researchers or psychologists to coin the term the bystander effect. And they said that the bystander effect is a result of two factors. The one is the diffusion of responsibility, the diffusion of responsibility and social influence. Now, what does that mean? Diffusion of responsibility means that somehow it comes naturally for many people that the more onlookers there are in a situation, the less personal responsibility an individual will feel to act. Okay, so we see, for example, when there are violent protests, how many people actually act to stop that violent protest? When there's mob justice, does anyone interfere? Don't know. There are so many onlookers that it results in the individual standing there, maybe thinking, I should do something. But, I'm not, because there are so many people around already. Now, the second one is social influence. So I'm standing there. There's a lot of people around me. We're all looking at the same situation. And now I'm trying to see who's going to do something. And if no one acts, I decide also not to act. Okay, so if someone is being killed in a mob justice incident or in a violent protest, I see no one is doing anything, I'm not going to do anything as well. That is the bystander effect. But what we need to do is that we should resist these social forces. Okay, and that requires that we have a sense of self-awareness. Who am I? What are my values? Okay, if I go this evening to bed and I've seen that someone is being killed or someone was killed right in front of my eyes, and I had an opportunity to actually do something about it, but I didn't, I must ask myself, would I be able to sleep well this evening? I must be aware of the situation around me. What are the circumstances that I'm finding myself in? If I feel, for example, when I do something, I can be harmed in the process as well, then of course one will take a step back and not get physically involved, but call at least for help. Okay. Critical thinking. We should ask questions. We should ask, for example, why is someone, no, not why, what's the situation like now, and why is someone getting involved in corruption, for example? Why is someone being rude to another person? Can't I or shouldn't I then stand up? Maybe I see someone is being rude and treating another person unfairly. I must ask myself also the question, why can't I go to that person and say, hey, it's not on. We don't treat people in the way that you are doing it now. Or I see that there's theft or corruption or fraud happening, or there's a conflict of interest. Am I just going to sit still? Or again, I ask myself, should I not be the one to do something? Of course, we should always think objectively and not with our emotions. And then when we work in a network, we are empowered. We can go to someone, we can go to our team members, we can go to our managers, and we can ask them the questions and ask them for advice. We can go to Tony, we can go to Amanda and say, what must I do now in this situation? That is part of the network that actually empowers us, but also supports us so that we resist the social forces that results in the bystander effect. Okay, now who are these upstanders? that I'm talking to. I'm actually not sure if there's such a word, but nevertheless, I've made it a word, if there isn't such a word. The photo you're seeing is Kalk Bay in the Cape. And there is a person with the name of Brandon, who in August this year saved the lives of 2 people. So that's the harbor wall. And when the sea is rough, that is what the harbor wall looks like. Really big waves coming. And 2 men were standing there and they were swept to sea, knocked off the harbor wall. There was this person, Brandon. And Brandon saw what happened and he immediately jumped in to go and help them. So the NSRI has these pink buoys. They must probably have them there in KZN as well, where a member of the public, if they can go and help someone, they grab that and they swim in. And that is what Brandon did. And he, in the meantime, while he was swimming, someone else called the NSRI. And so he brought out the first person. And then he swam back to the second person. The second person started to get into trouble. NSRI just arrived, and they then helped. They gave another buoy to Brandon, and then they swam out with the second person. And Brandon chose not to be identified further. In the newspapers, there were calls, articles asking, please, Brandon, come forward, identify yourself. You know, people want to praise him as a hero, but none of us know exactly who Brandon was. And why I say that he chose not to be identified, think of reporting misconduct, and maybe you don't want to be identified. Then one becomes an anonymous whistleblower or anonymous upstander like Brandon. This is Owen Burns. Owen Burns is 13 years old. He was at the time. He lives in America. And he was sitting in his room. He likes to use a ketty, a slingshot. It's one of his hobbies. And he was sitting in his room when he heard his sister screaming. And he looked out of the window and he saw that his sister is being attacked by a person outside. And he didn't then just sit down. Or he took his ketty, his slingshot, and he put a marble in it. And he hit the attacker on the head. Okay. And that saved his sister's life, probably. So Owen Burns said, 13. Why did he do this? The media asked him, why did you do that? And he said, well, because if I didn't, she would have been taken away or worse. Now, people then started giving Owen money. And he said, I received a bunch of money for no reason. I'm grateful for all of that, but you don't have to give me all this stuff for no reason. I know I did something right, but it's just me. Okay. And that is the thing, we should not report misconduct because we want something. We should report it because we want to be upstanders. We want to be heroes and rescuers. When we refer to these people, there are numerous examples of people doing these things despite putting themselves in harm's way. They just do what they feel and they must do. And that feeling comes from one's own values, that you feel you must do. So these people basically choose to be upstanders and not passive bystanders and waiting for someone else to do something. They demonstrate courage, even though their act of bravery is not self-serving. It's rather altruistic, but through their selfless acts, their altruistic acts, they save, these two that I have talked about now and numerous others, they actually save the lives of other people. So the question then arises is, how do these acts, or how do the acts of whistleblowers differ from those of such rescuers? Whistleblowers' actions are not aimed at saving themselves, then they're not a whistleblower. It is aimed at saving, if not individuals' lives or the environment, it is to save their organization, to protect their organization, so that it isn't exposed to reputational harm, and in the process contributes to the sustainability of the institution. So some, like I've mentioned, some choose to have their names known, and others prefer to go anonymous, stay anonymous, for their own reasons. It could be because of a fear of retaliation. It could be just because, you know, they're just doing the right thing. They don't have to be known for doing the right thing. Upstanders are people who basically have confidence in their judgment and values. Okay? They know what they stand for. They grew up with a strong sense of morality. And they believe that their actions will make a difference. If you talk to whistleblowers, I have spoken to many whistleblowers, and they will say that they really believe that when they reported something, they are alerting the organization to unethical conduct in its midst, and by reporting it, they are empowering the organization to actually nip it in the bud, okay, so that that unethical conduct does not become part of the culture. Okay? Because we know that if unethical conduct is not acted on, then it could become the norm, it could become the culture of the organization. And they say that upstanders also are more likely to do the right thing because they take time to stop, think about it. What did I see? Should I be the one to do something? If you're an upstander, of course, then one is the one to do something. And then they act, then they report to people or entities that they believe will take action. And that is so important, because when you look at, again, at research, also that 2021 study, we saw that in South Africa, it was 38% of those people who did not report what they saw was because they didn't believe that any action will be taken. So that consequence management is very important. And that is the reason also why people are upstanders as it comes to whistleblowing, so that the organization can act. And the opposite of bystanders, that's, I hope, very clear, is bystanders prefer to just look away and say, you know, someone else will do it. It's none of my concern. I don't want to get involved, and rationalizing why they would rather keep quiet. Yeah, this is my stats that I've mentioned. It's 38% of employees did not report what they have observed. And the reasons were they didn't want to be seen as a troublemaker by management. Okay? And 21% said they thought the organization already knew about it. It's that social influence that I've spoken about. And 15% said they felt that it was none of their business, whatever is happening. And that is that typical diffusion of responsibility that we've talked about in the Kitty Genovese bystander effect. Now, let's apply this to Brandon. If Brandon was a bystander, what would he have done? Well, He might have decided, no, let me just wait together with the other people standing around here for the NSRI to arrive, because he might be concerned that he's going to do something wrong, trying to save these people, and then maybe later he'll be accused by the authorities for causing these two men more harm than good. That was possible thought. Or he could have said, well, there's lots of people here. Maybe one of them have already contacted the authorities, or maybe he would think one of them will jump in. After all, the sea is rough, and I don't want to risk my life for unknown people. Or he could have decided, okay, well, I'm turning a blind eye. I am just walking away, continue on the promenade, and leave the men to fend for themselves. But if Brandon had chosen to be a bystander, waiting for other men to act or for others to act, the men might have died. The photo that you see there was taken at the scene, and he brought the first person in and put him on that piece of the wall there. And when the NSRI came, they, like I've mentioned, they went to fetch the other person, and they also helped Brandon by giving him more tools to survive, basically. So when, as employees of an institution, when we decide that, no, I'll rather just be a bystander, I'm going to look the other way, what could that mean for the organization? What would it mean, or could it mean for employees, the internal stakeholders, as well as the external stakeholders, the suppliers, contractors such as myself? It could have detrimental consequences for the organization. It can harm the reputation. It can decrease trust in the organization. And it can lead, ultimately, if one now goes very far to the extreme, but it's not an impossibility, that an organization can actually cease to exist. Like we have seen, for example, with Steinhoff. I'm sure you're familiar with the Steinhoff saga. So organizations can diffuse the social and behavioral paralysis of the bystander effect. And how should the institution do that? And I'm sure that it is, well, I know that those processes are continuous. There needs to be an increased awareness of the detrimental effects of wrongdoing on the organization. Okay. And I think, you know, just conversations amongst people, we call it ethics talk. Just talk about what would be the effect if our organizational culture becomes toxic. Okay, if it becomes if unethical conduct becomes the norm, what will be the effect on the institution? Of course, there needs to be training on how and where to blow the whistle. And I'm sure, I know that there are many efforts in this regard, and Tony will be able to answer all the questions in that regard. But it is also incumbent on all the upstanders and the bystanders in an institution to read the relevant policy. You know, people only read, usually that's what I've learned in my days. I was in the public service for 19 years. And I remember that the only policies any one of us ever read was the leave policy, the promotions policy, and the benefits policy, and then the maternity leave policy. And that was that. The rest we'll read when it becomes applicable. So I urge you to just read the policy, the whistleblowing policy, and understand how and what it is that you should report. Remember, you don't need all the evidence when you report wrongdoing. The main thing is that one should have reasonable belief that what you are reporting is true. Okay. It is the job of the investigators to go and find all the evidence, but there must be sufficient information initially to at least give the investigators a starting point. So one would want to include, when you report, what happened, when did it happen, who was involved, okay? How did it happen? Why do you think it happened? Okay. And then important is that management should also be trained on how to handle whistleblowing reports. Another study that Dr. Paul Foster and I did in 2019 in corporate South Africa showed that 42% of people in South Africa who observed misconduct reported it to their direct line manager. 42%, and only 2% to the hotline. Okay. And then there were reports to HR and to risk management and so on. But the question is any of us equipped actually to receive a report of wrongdoing? And can we ask the right questions from the upstander who has now come forward? And are we able to keep the identity of the person confidential as well as the content of the information? Or do I go, now I've received a report as a manager, of a line manager, so now I take this report and I go and discuss it with my colleague because I don't know what to do. And I say who reported it. Well, there goes all confidentiality in the process. So as management, one should also understand how a report should be treated, and of course how our upstanders should be treated. And then also we need to sensitize employees to the measures they can take to protect themselves from retaliation. Now, the policy gives assurance that there will be protection against retaliation, and we in South Africa, we have the Protected Disclosures Act, as amended in 2017, Act number 5 of 2017. And that act provides for protection for whistleblowers who have suffered occupational detriment because they blew the whistle. And occupational detriment would be, for example, trumped up disciplinary charges, dismissal because of these trumped up disciplinary charges, maybe demotion or taking away huge responsibilities from a person. I always say, moving transfer someone against their will and the like. They're all there in the act. So what the act provides for is that if one has suffered any of those actions because one blew the whistle, then the institution or the employer can be taken through a civil process, charged in a civil court. What usually, instead of using that act, it seems mostly the labor law is more used. I think it's because maybe it's easier to use or apply that. But what we see is right. So there's the law that can protect us, but upstanders can protect themselves as well. And there are numerous ways that one shouldn't provide identifiers and so on. I'm not going to elaborate on that. You can see I've written a whistleblowing non-retaliation toolkit, and I'll give you the link now where you can download it for free. Yes, there it is. There's the whistleblowing non-retaliation toolkit that can be downloaded from the Ethics Institute's website, www.tei.org.za, and you just go and look under knowledge, resources, handbooks, and you can get all of these there for free. There's also, should you be the recipient of a whistleblower report, there's the first responder guideline also that gives practical advice on how to deal with such issues. So, blowing the whistle, Brandon style. If you can, you will. Upstanders are heroes, saviors, and rescuers. Whistleblowers are heroes, saviors, and rescuers. They worry less about the consequences of helping and more about the example they are setting not just to others, but for future generations. Bianca Goodson, who was one of the first state capture whistleblowers at Trillion Capital, when she was offered asylum for her and her daughter, because she was really suffering horrendous detriments, she said, no, I can't go to Belgium. What would my daughter think? I've run away from, for having done the right thing. I've run away. So the example one sets for future generations. Whistleblowers, when they are in a situation that feels wrong, the emotional brain starts reacting on autopilot that results in the conscious consideration to make wiser choices about what to do next. They become a Brandon or an Owen. So my dear friend and former colleague and SARS whistleblower, Johan van Lockerenberg said, oh, sorry, no, man. Johan said, referring to the Brandons and Owens of the world, said, all these we accept as natural, these actions, and lucky, and we accept them for what they are. But when someone reports wrongdoing, somehow we want to complicate it into something highly complex. Whistleblowing is whistleblowing. Being an upstander is being an upstander. It is the act of seeing something wrong and acting on it. Make it known in order to address it. And then he said, Brandon style, if you can, you will. Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Tony? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Lizelle. I'm not sure if I see any.
I see hearts and claps.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that. Maybe I should, ask, seeing that we have a few minutes and there's no questions, but recently we've been listening or hearing a lot about whistleblowers. For example, the one case in currently in Johannesburg, where this couple was going to court to report police conduct, and they were on the way to the court. They were shot and actually killed. And then we have the likes, the late Babita, I think, Deokaran as well. So when one gets these kind of messages coming out when you blow the whistle, I just want to hear your take on the the bystanders and upstanders approach to the those kind of cases, Lizelle.
Okay, thank you for that question, and I think it might be on the minds of everyone, or most people. Look, again, having spoken to quite a number of, let me say, the state capture whistleblowers, those ones that we see in the news for the last few years, but then also others, many others that I've spoken to that's not on that level. The thing is, as when a person, the upstanders, those that I'm now talking about, they will tell you that they did not go out thinking, that they are now going to be a whistleblower. They become accidental whistleblowers, accidental heroes as well. They didn't get up in the morning to say, "Hey, today I'm going to blow the whistle." It was just a natural thing, a natural action for them to act on their values. And yes, it is scary. It is scary what we see. And there's a couple of Philemon Ngwenya he was the Vrede dairy farm Estina whistleblower. He was attacked and killed in front of his home. Mos Parku was killed in 2010 already. We blew the whistle on corruption in Rustenburg municipality, in a similar fashion as Babita. There's Dr. Lennox Garane, who killed himself. He worked in Parliament, not a member of Parliament, but he reported something and he was bullied to the effect that he actually committed suicide right there in the offices. And so we can continue, Tony. But like I've said, the upstanders, they did what they did because they felt they should do it. Some of them say that they will, not all of them say they will do it again. But some say they might do it in a different manner. And that is why I say one can protect oneself from victimization. And that's also the reason why I wrote that very practical non-retaliation toolkit. And I wrote that with a lot of information coming from whistleblowers who have gone through detriments, also in terms of how to protect one's own lives. Bystanders will be bystanders. They seldom come to the party.
Thanks, Lizelle.
Oh, can I say something further?
Sure.
It's when I was introduced, it was stated that I'm the co-founding director of the Whistleblower House. And I want you also to take this information further, because maybe you know of someone who needs help. So 2 years ago, 2021, Bianca Goodson, that whistleblower that I referred to, decided that there's so much talk, and government is also talking. We must help and protect whistleblowers and so on. But no one, did something. So Bianca and I decided that we have to establish an organization that gives holistic support to whistleblowers. And this holistic support includes psychological support, financial support, and safety and security, and then legal, of course. We don't give it ourselves. We facilitate access to legal, etc., psychologists, and so on. And we have moved people around when they were unsafe in their places, and 1 or 2 we've also helped to get out of the country. We relied the first year, we didn't have any money, and we could only rely on the goodwill of people and lawyers giving their time to us pro bono, or to whistleblowers, as well as psychologists and the rest. And we were lucky to get funding this year. A couple of million, it helps, it really helped. And we can now pay for extra psychological services, going beyond the pro bono, for example, and also legal services and so on. Currently, and we went, we opened our doors officially on the 22nd of February last year. And we currently have, as at yesterday, 235 clients, as we call them, 235 upstanders that we provide assistance to. So if you know of anyone that needs that kind of an assistance, because they blew the whistle, they can find us at the Whistleblower House. It's basically www.whistleblowerhouse.org. And yeah, it just shows you, Tony, that and everyone here today, that there are really many upstanders, um, and they've done the right thing. And it might now be that they have been retaliated against, but there's help. Okay, so if there is retaliation, there's the law and there's further assistance. And now I will stop to punt that organization.
Okay, thank you for that, Lizelle. That's very useful information, I must say, and we'll definitely take note. Without much, time wasting and seeing that we're coming to the conclusion, I I just want to say, and you mentioned, increasing awareness is important, and maybe at the beginning of this session, whilst this is International Fraud Awareness Week, and we align ourselves and we are a supporter of that as a university, hence this talk. Just if I didn't introduce myself to the attendees, I'm Tony Singaram, that's looking after the ethics office. And basically our role at the ethics office, as Lizelle rightfully said, is to increase awareness and promote ethical behavior. Ethics forms a key component of governance, and you'll agree with that, Lizelle, as well. Basically, we're inspiring by inspiring compliance and doing the right thing when no one is watching. And these are through interventions such as training, awareness, etc. So we're not saying that we have any magical solutions, but through small interventions such as these, we're trying to take the university forward in terms of, because otherwise, unethical conduct is a risk to the university, and there's definitely a need to get people to behave ethically. So I just thought I'll give that as a preamble to the ethics office role in these spaces at the university. And before, I see there's no comments or questions, but I'd just like to, as a closing remark, just say to all attendees that the university has a zero tolerance to fraud risk, given that this is International Fraud Awareness Week. And it's implemented several policies and interventions, such as to prevent and detect and respond to such conduct, especially. And I think this is important to mention, that we have a 24-hour toll-free tip-offs anonymous to report, fraudulent activities within the university. And the number, just for the sake of the viewers or the attendees, is 0800 203 285. 0800 203 285. There's also a unique email, which is UKZN@tipoffs.com. So it's UKZN@tipoffs.com. And lastly, I must also say that staff are welcome. We do have an ethics line, email address that is shared. So it's ethicsoffice@ukzn.ac.za. So if staff or students that feel there's something that they want to bounce off, not necessarily blow the whistle and go through that whole, some of them believe it's a trauma, and so they have an opportunity via the ethics office email address to send in their concerns that the ethics office will attempt to assist them going forward. I just thought I'll mention that. Otherwise, as that's basically the concluding remarks, and I see we up time-wise as well. I'm just allowing for any comments, if anybody wants to, before I issue the vote of thanks. So it's open to any comments, any concerns that people may want to raise.
I'm seeing there are some comments in the chat. Basically, Valerie, okay, thanking me for the presentation, but then it's a pleasure, Valerie. And then Tombi Fikile, a difficult topic, values plus ethics. The presentation is reaffirming in a situation which has to rebuild its moral fiber. Exactly. And that's why we cannot afford to become despondent because of everything that we read and hear about. Okay. Those are the, some of the comments, and then Amanda has given a lot of advice and direction in the chat function, Tony, to our attendees here also, where they can blow the whistle and so on.
Thank you, Amanda. Okay, colleagues, thank you. Once again, I want to say thank you to Lizelle for making the time, and we look forward to the partnership that we share, and we'll definitely take note of the offer in terms of the whistleblowing. I must add, though, that the university really is very supportive of whistleblowers. It's just that we, as you said, education and awareness is an important aspect. And then I also want to thank the corporate relations team, for having assisted us in facilitating, this webinar today. So corporate relations, and then and not to mention and forget my colleagues, Amanda Mazibuko there, Dr. Patrick, who's just heading a very important section at the university, and currently that's the forensics unit. So we quite extremely busy, and I must say that I want to say thank you to them for having made the time and having been panelists. And if there's anybody I missed, or lastly, not to mention the attendees, I want to thank you as well. And if there's anybody that I missed, my apologies, but thank you. So yes, I think we can safely say that we conclude.
Thank you, Tony. Just there's a question just now before we finally conclude is if the slides will be shared, I can send it to you, and maybe you can send it to all of those who are online.
Okay, will do. Thank you for that, Lizelle.
Yeah, then from my side, I also say take care, stay safe, be an upstander, and let's build the moral fiber of our society, one by one, one action by one action. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lizelle. Bye-bye.